Even before votes could be mailed in for this year's presidential election, some changes were set in motion for next year's city election. Two members of the city council announced campaigns for mayor, and more recently, the district councilor who represents West Roxbury and Jamaica Plain announced he would not seek re-election. To talk about his decision after serving 10 years on the council is Matt O'Malley. Thank you very much for being with us, Councilor.
Always great to be with you, Chris.
That's 10 years plus another year to go. I want to ask you about the timing of this. I know when you announced it was mainly about personal needs and priorities, but we're thinking of what this past 8 months or so in Boston has been like. I'm thinking the scenes of polarization at Holy Name Rotary, which is so uncharacteristic of District 6, I think. I mean, does any of that come into play here?
I mean, I think that the sum total of the last 10 years have been absolutely, a remarkable experience. There've clearly been some difficult days and some just incredibly overly joyous days. But my decision wasn't based on this year or anything. It was really based on the fact that for the last 10 years, I have been given my dream job. I think we've done it fairly well, if I do say so myself, and we've had an incredible opportunity to serve. I don't think anyone should get into elective office seeking to serve in that capacity for the rest of their life or for a career. 10 years was a great time. Last Monday, actually, a week ago today, was my 10-year anniversary of having been sworn in. And this has been I've been thinking about this for quite some time, even before the pandemic, that this would likely be my last term. And I just felt it was, while it's early, certainly the election won't be for another 11 months or so. I felt that I needed to share with my districts, who's given me so much, that this was our decision, my family's decision, and I am incredibly excited about the next chapter.
You called this a dream job even 10 years ago. I looked at the clip again when you were sworn in, but in your letter you mentioned being a high school student, sketching out something in your math book or calculus book. What made that happen?
So it's really a great story, and I hope that my story will resonate with young people around Boston, is that I always loved politics growing up. Never in a million years thought I'd ever run for office initially, and certainly there were no one in my family had ever run for office before. And while I was in high school, I began interning for a city councilor. I met this former councilor, a woman named Peggy Davis-Mullen, at a family party. My other cousin was the babysitter of her kids, so she came to my cousin's graduation party. Began chatting with her, told her I was interested in getting and learning more about politics. She offered me an internship. I eagerly accepted. I often tell the story that I didn't own a tie, so I would wear the tie that I was my part of my Roach Brothers uniform from bagging groceries at Roach Brothers into City Hall, where I began interning after school. And about 15 years after that, I would literally move into the office where I was first an intern at 15 years of age. So it really shows that this city has amazing opportunities, and part of my focus over the last decade is to make sure that we have more opportunities for more kids in every part of this city. But it absolutely has been a dream job, and as I said, it's incredibly difficult. It can be maddening, but it was been the most worthwhile thing, and it truly has been just the absolute high point of my professional life to have been hired by 74,000 Bostonians every 2 years for a decade to be their voice at City Hall.
I know when you were sworn in, you talked about the opportunities that come with being almost privileged to grow up in Boston. But in the interim, do you see things any differently as far as the way opportunities are distributed?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no doubt that we have, we need to do a better job as a society, and certainly in Boston, to make sure that every kid in every zip code has the same access to these opportunities. There's no question that there are disparities around education, the disparities on health, often by race, and we want to make sure. And I know that I and my 12 colleagues, and certainly the mayor, and I would argue every elected official in Boston, wants to make sure that your zip code or your census tract should not ever dictate what opportunities you have. So there is still work to do, but certainly it's been something that I've tried to really focus on and continue to focus in the year ahead.
One of the other things I was reminded of when I looked at your swearing in by Mayor Menino back in 2010, his notion of the job, it's not about making headlines. It's about the granular things, the personal things, the phone call, sometimes in the off hours. Did that turn out to be true for you?
There's no question. And behind me, you may see there's a thank you, Mayor Menino sign. I really credit Tom Menino as a mentor to me, even before I was elected. Certainly, I remember Mayor Flynn, of course, when I was very young, but Mayor Menino was the first mayor that really I grew up with, so to speak, and many Bostonians did. And I think very proudly he wore the title of being the urban mechanic, the guy who wouldn't necessarily command headlines. Of course, he did once he was mayor, but was an effective councilor and an effective mayor because he was so focused like a laser on those quality of life constituent service issues. So it's something that I've tried to emulate. And again, because of an incredible team that I've been lucky enough to work with over these past 10 years, we've always had a premium focus on constituent services. Now, the job has changed somewhat in this time where there is a larger focus on some larger issues around education, around housing, certainly around public safety, and that's important too. But I always say that the role of a counselor has to be really bifold. It has to be focused on those larger issues that affect us all, but also we should never lose focus of those constituent service quality of life issues, getting a pothole filled, getting a street light fixed, making sure that snow plows are able to hit every street. That's such an important part of the job. And again, my team and I were reflecting on our career. We've done something like 6,300 individual constituent service calls over the last decade. That's something I'm equally as proud of as some of the great strides that we've made on some major environmental policy.
Now, when you were back in high school, at least it's hard for me to imagine you were focused on the environment at that stage. Maybe you were, but I have a feeling that seems to be about a rapport between you and the district too.
No, there's no question. I was very lucky. As I said, I didn't grow up from a political family, but I did grow up in a family of environmentalists. So I remember learning the importance and the efficacy of composting from my dad at a very, very early age. But there's no question the environmental movement has taken added urgency over the past 10 years, and even more acutely over the last 4 years under the Trump administration, where cities and towns, and I believe Boston would be chief among them, have really led up in this space. But your point is right, Chris. This is something that, derisively, perhaps 10 years ago, I might be referred to as a tree hugger, although that was a term that I always wore with great pride. But there's no question that my district particularly, but I would argue the entire city, but I'm most certainly knowledgeable about District 6, has really helped guide a lot of the really concrete and aggressive environmental strategies and initiatives that we've put forward. So it's been great. My name's been the name on the bill, or my name's been the name on the ballot, but it's really been a community of people, and the environmental community has been exceptional to me, teaching me, supporting me, and making sure that we can actually affect some meaningful change.
Well, in the oversimplifications of campaigns, certainly this past year, Ed Markey was one of the leading exponents of the Green New Deal, but you endorsed the person running against him. No, it doesn't mean that he was the anti-environmental candidate, but it sounds that was not an easy decision for you. No,
listen, I respect Senator Markey. I respected him greatly before the race, and I respect him greatly after the race. He had a tremendous showing and had a great campaign, clearly. Had a big win. I proudly supported Joe Kennedy, who's my friend as it relates to environmental issues. This is a guy who was in lockstep with every major environmental initiative over the last, certainly his time in office. It was rated as well or better in some case than Senator Markey by many of these environmental issue advocacy groups. But there was no question whoever won that race was going to continue to lead on the environment. I don't take away for a second Senator Markey's long and lengthy advocacy and effectiveness in this space. Joe's a friend, and in this business, I truly believe one of the most important attributes is loyalty, and I will always be loyal to my friends. I was proud to support Joe. Sorry it didn't work out, but again, it was one of those scenarios where if it couldn't be Joe, I'm sure Senator Markey will continue to do a great job.
What about tough votes? When you were sworn in, the mayor says, where do you take a couple of votes and see how much you like this job? Were there any votes like that?
It's funny. The first vote I ever took was the day I was sworn in on November 30th, 2010. December 1st, 2010, was the first removal of a sitting city councilor in quite some time. It was the removal of former councilor Chuck Turner. So that was literally the first vote I had to cast. So I think I know, a thing or two about some tough votes. And that was really very difficult. It's always difficult to remove a colleague or to vote to remove a colleague. Shortly after that, there were some school closures in my district, including the Agassiz School on Child Street in Jamaica Plain. That was obviously, we didn't vote on that, but obviously it was part of the school budget. I often refer to one of the votes I'm most proud of was a vote where I stood alone on the casino, the proposed East Boston casino. I do not support casinos. I think that the benefits are far outweighed by the negativity that they can bring to cities or communities. And I was the sole vote looking for a citywide vote, which is this sort of in the weeds now on the way the legislation was written. The city had to affirmatively vote for a citywide vote. I argued that even though East Boston would bear the brunt of the casino, it would clearly impact the finances of the entire city. That was a very, very difficult vote. And then, of course, budget votes through the years, and certainly no more than this year's budget vote, have been difficult votes. Through it all, I've always been accessible and upfront. One thing I'm very proud of, less so during the pandemic, obviously, but we held office hours several times at different coffee shops through the districts every month. Additionally, I do office hours on the T. We'd make sure that we'd visit small businesses to try to highlight them and have afternoon or evening office hours to get folks who wouldn't necessarily be able to meet us at 8 a.m. in the morning. So it's being accessible, listening to all sides before an important vote, and then being honest once my decision was reached. And again, there are some people who would appreciate that even when they didn't agree with my ultimate vote. But I think it's important for whomever follows me and whomever serves in elective office to listen to your constituents, but ultimately trust your gut. Just be upfront during these tough votes, and you'll see. Nothing is final in this business. You can take a tough vote, you can lose a supporter, but you can win him or her back on a subsequent issue.
One more question. Among the other things that we had a hard time previously imagining in District 6 was that a man who lived no farther away than Rosendale would get stopped by ICE while jogging on VFW Parkway. Now, I'm sure that was roundly condemned by all kinds of people, but you went beyond that. How did you address it the way you did?
Well, because this is a young man who I didn't know before this awful incident, but I wanted to reach out to, and I'd say, we've become friendly. We've gone running together, and it's important just to. It struck me particularly hard as someone who's run those streets, run literally on the VFW Parkway, where Benno was stopped back in September or October, and I've run it again hundreds, if not 1,000 times through my life. And I've never for a moment thought that I would be stopped. And I think that's very, easy to understand why I never had that fear. The fact that this guy was out running, as many of us have done during the pandemic, to try to get some exercise, get some fresh air, despite wearing a mask, and was stopped for no other reason than the color of his skin. It is just unconscionable. It is abhorrent that it happened to him. And we collectively have to call it out for what it is, racism and wrong. And, it shows that, we often, I think, can delude, be delusional by saying these things wouldn't happen here. Well, it clearly has happened here. And we need to put policies and procedures in place so it doesn't happen again. And we need to use our voice to call out racial injustice and racism when it happens.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to join us, and wishing you the best in your next position, wherever that may be.
Well, thank you very much, Chris, and thank you for your incredible your work through the years. The city is far richer because of your incredible journalism, and we're just very lucky to have you, and it's great to be with you and Adam and your incredible team at BNN.
It all comes from people we talk to. Thank you very much for joining us. Boston City Councilor Matt O'Malley. We'll have more news in just a moment.